Something is wrong with the sky, not broken wrong, not science fiction wrong, just quietly, persistently, relentlessly wrong. The way a crack in a wall looks small until one morning you realise it runs all the way to the ceiling. The numbers that used to sit at the edge of possibility keep sliding into the middle of reality. And the middle of reality right now, at least across the UK and much of Western Europe, is a heat that has no business being here. A few hours ago, the UK Met Office issued only its second ever extreme heat red warning, only the second time in recorded history. The first one was 2022, and here we are again, barely 3 years later, staring down the same cliff. Temperatures expected to reach the high 30s, with a very real, non-negligible chance of hitting 40 degrees Celsius across parts of Greater London and the surrounding areas. To anyone who doesn't live in the UK, that number might not land with its full weight. So let's sit with it for a moment. The UK is not the Sahara, it's not Phoenix, Arizona in July. It's a country of grey skies, mild summers, and people who apologise for complaining about the rain. When 40 degrees Celsius becomes a real forecast, not a model outlier, not a fringe scenario, but a genuine meteorological expectation, something fundamental has shifted. And the data, if you actually look at it, tells a story that should stop people mid-scroll. The red warning from the Met Office doesn't get issued casually. These are reserved, in the agency's own words, for dangerous weather that poses a risk to life. Not just to vulnerable populations, but to everyone. Not just the elderly or infants or people with pre-existing conditions, though all of those groups face heightened danger. Everyone. And alongside that red warning came a separate heat health warning from the UK Health Security Agency, essentially confirming the same thing from a public health angle. 2 agencies, 2 warnings, 1 message. This is serious. Now, it's easy to hear that and think it sounds alarmist. Heat waves happen, people go to the beach. It's summer. But the physiology of what extreme heat actually does to the human body isn't dramatic in the way people expect. It doesn't announce itself loudly, it creeps. The body starts working harder to regulate temperature. Sweat evaporates, core temperature rises, the heart pumps faster. If the cooling mechanism fails, and in high humidity, it can fail surprisingly quickly, things go wrong fast. And one of the most insidious features of a heat wave like this one isn't the peak daytime temperature. It's what happens at night. The term for it is a tropical night. It sounds almost exotic, but it isn't. A tropical night is simply a night where the temperature never drops below 20 degrees Celsius. And the reason that's dangerous isn't just discomfort, isn't just poor sleep, it's physiological debt. During a heat wave, the body accumulates heat stress through the day. To recover from that stress, the body needs cooler overnight temperatures to reset itself. To bring core temperature down, let organs rest, allow circulation to normalise. When the night stays hot and humid, that recovery doesn't happen. The body goes into the next day already in deficit, already behind. And when that happens 2 nights in a row, 3 nights in a row, the compounding effect becomes genuinely medical. People become fatigued in ways that aren't fixed by rest. Cognitive function drops. And for people who are already carrying health conditions, the deficit accumulates faster than the body can resolve it. A measure that accounts for temperature, humidity, direct sun exposure, and air movement all at once. Because all 4 of those variables interact to determine how efficiently the body can cool itself through sweating. A measure that accounts for temperature, humidity, direct sun exposure, and air movement all at once. Because all 4 of those variables interact to determine how efficiently the body can cool itself through sweating. A dry 38 degrees and a humid 38 degrees are not the same experience. The humid version wins, and it wins badly. The UK is not a dry heat country. This is a crucial point that often gets lost when people compare UK temperatures to those in southern Europe or parts of Asia. Britain sits on a maritime climate. The Atlantic is right there, humidity is baseline. When a continental European heat plume drives temperatures up to this level, on top of that existing humidity, the wet bulb effect becomes the dominant story. Sweating, the body's primary mechanism for cooling, becomes far less effective. This is why the scientists and doctors who study heat stress don't just track air temperature. They track something called wet bulb temperature. And article, what also doesn't lift is the infrastructure pressure. Because here's the other dimension of a UK heat wave that distinguishes it from countries where this kind of heat is routine. The UK was not built for this. Railway tracks in Britain are designed for temperate operating temperatures. When those tracks hit extreme heat, they expand and buckle, train cancellations multiply, Overhead power lines sag. Electrical infrastructure strains under increased demand from every home and office trying to get cooler. Roads soften. Hospitals, already stretched beyond comfortable capacity in most seasons, face a surge in heat-related admissions. Ambulance response times lengthen. And care workers, people looking after the elderly, people looking after disabled individuals, people who work in warehouses, on building sites, in kitchens, continue working in conditions that the infrastructure simply was not designed to support. The red warning isn't abstract. It arrives in the form of real systems under real strain. People died in the 2022 heatwave. Hundreds of them. Not in some remote region with limited access to emergency care. In Britain, in a country with a national health service, widespread media coverage, and near universal access to mobile phones. And they died because of heat. Because the heat became incompatible with life for enough hours that the body could not compensate. That is not dramatic language. That is what the mortality data showed. And a few weeks before this current heat wave, there were deaths again. Teenagers jumping into cold water to escape the last bout of extreme heat, dying from the thermal shock. These are not isolated incidents from an earlier, more innocent era of weather. These are happening now, this year, in sequence. Here's where the science becomes something you can't really walk away from without feeling the weight of it. The number of days in the UK with temperatures above 32 degrees Celsius has tripled in the most recent decade compared to the 1960s. Not increased. Tripled. And that specific threshold for marine conform. Marine 32 degrees in June has been made roughly 100 times more likely by human-caused climate change, according to World Weather Attribution Analysis. The 11 hottest years on record globally are the last 11 years, not scattered across history. Consecutive. And the extremes, the statistical tails, the events that used to sit at the edge of the distribution, are warming faster than the average, which means the ceiling's rising faster than the floor. A coin flip for something that was previously in the category of this will never happen. The conclusion from attribution science was that without climate change, that level of heat in the UK would have been essentially impossible. Not unlikely, essentially impossible. And now, the probability of exceeding 40 degrees Celsius in the UK has increased by a factor of 20 compared to the 1960s, 20 times more likely. And last year, the Met Office put the probability of seeing another 40-degree day within the next 12 years at 50-50. A coin flip for something that was previously in the category of this will never happen. There is a mental model that helps make sense of this, and it's worth holding in your head even after this video ends. Think of the entire distribution of possible temperatures in a given season as a bell curve, the classic shape that puts average events in the middle and rare events at the edges. Climate change doesn't just nudge the middle, it moves the whole curve, and when the whole curve moves toward the right, toward hotter, the right-hand tail, the extreme heat end, moves into territory that used to be empty. What was once a rare 1 in 100 year event doesn't become a 1 in 80 year event. It becomes a 1 in 5 year event. That's not an exaggeration. That's literally what the attribution studies have been showing across one extreme event after another, in one region after another. And this heatwave is not happening in isolation. There was another one less than 4 weeks ago. Records broken then too. 2 record-breaking heat waves in a single summer is not a coincidence. It's a pattern. And the pattern has a cause. There will always be people who say we've always had heat waves. This is true. There will always be people who say weather is variable. This is also true. The 1976 heat wave in the UK is often cited, and it was genuinely extraordinary. Standpipes in the streets, people queuing for water from emergency pumps, a transformed working day. It left a mark on national memory so deep that it's still invoked 50 years later as proof that extreme summers are not new. And that's fair, they are not new. But here is what the data shows about that comparison. If the 1976 heat wave were to happen today, the same meteorological event, same atmospheric pattern, it would be hotter, because the baseline temperature has shifted. The same heat wave sitting on top of a warmer atmosphere produces higher peaks. And in 50 years, the kind of heat wave that modelling considers plausible for the UK in the 2050s pushes into the mid-40s Celsius. The mid-40s. In Britain, with more frequent tropical nights, with higher humidity, because for every degree of warming, The atmosphere holds approximately 7% more moisture. And more moisture means more humidity, more oppressive wet bulb conditions, less ability for the body to recover. That number, about 7% per degree, is worth pausing on. It comes from basic atmospheric physics, the Clausius-Clapeyron relation. And it means that as warming continues, the humidity problem compounds the temperature problem. In a way that makes each additional degree more punishing than the last. Not linearly more punishing, exponentially more punishing, because the body's cooling capacity has hard limits, and humid heat approaches those limits faster. And El Niño hasn't even fully arrived yet. That fact sits at the back of everything happening this summer, and it doesn't get nearly enough attention. El Niño is a natural climate pattern in the Pacific that drives global temperatures upward in the years it's active. It's layering on top of the human-caused warming trend like a wave on top of a tide. The temperature records being set right now are extraordinary. And this is happening in a year that is only in the early stages of El Niño's influence. What next year looks like, as El Niño peaks and its effects propagate fully through global weather systems, is a question that honest climatologists are finding difficult to answer without a degree of anxiety they don't usually express publicly. But here's the thing about all of this that tends to get lost in the urgency of warning people about this particular week, this particular red warning, this particular forecast. The conversation always snaps back to immediate survival. Stay hydrated, stay cool, check on your neighbours. And those things matter. They genuinely do, and they should be said. But they can become a way of mentally filing this as a crisis that begins on Wednesday and ends on Friday, after which everything returns to whatever we now call normal. It doesn't return. That's the part that needs to settle in. The trajectory is documented, the mechanisms are understood, and the trend is accelerating. Warming's accelerating. Sea level rise is accelerating. The rate of temperature increase now is faster than it was even a few decades ago, and the consequence of that is that impacts which were projected for 2050 are arriving in 2025. Events that were called unprecedented are becoming annual. Vocabulary is running out. The word unprecedented has been used so many times to describe events in the last 5 years that it has started to feel like a weather forecast cliché rather than a scientific statement about statistical probability. And in that space, the space between the urgency of this week and the enormity of the long-term trajectory, there's a kind of paralysis that sets in for a lot of people. It's too big. It's too slow for daily news cycles, but too fast for social policy. It spans generations, but it's also happening right now, to real people, killing them in real time, this summer, in a country where people don't expect to die from heat. The social distribution of that risk is also not random. People working physical outdoor jobs, people in non-air-conditioned warehouses and care homes and kitchens, people experiencing homelessness, people on medications that interfere with the body's ability to regulate temperature, people with respiratory conditions, people in the upper floors of poorly insulated homes. These populations are not equally distributed across society. Extreme heat doesn't sort people by fragility alone. It sorts them, in large part, by the material conditions of their life, which makes this both a climate story and a social one, and both of those things deserve to be held in the same sentence. What happened this week, the second ever extreme heat red warning in UK history, is not a standalone event to be processed and then archived. It's a data point in a trend that has been visible for decades, and that every subsequent summer is extending further in the same direction. Different research logos appearing, multi-group consensus, with attribution studies that can now quantify not just whether climate change contributed, but by how much. The answer is substantially, profoundly. In the case of 40-degree heat in Britain, the answer is, without human-caused warming, this probably doesn't happen at all. And the trajectory from here, if emissions continue, if warming continues to accelerate, is toward a world where mid-40-degree temperatures in the UK are within the envelope of what a summer can produce. The arrow's pointing somewhere specific, and the speed at which it's travelling has been increasing. That's what the last 11 years of consecutive heat records mean. That's what trebled frequencies of extreme heat days since the 1960s mean. That's what a 20-fold increase in the probability of 40-degree days in Britain means. So yes, stay cool this week, drink water, check on people who live alone. Don't underestimate what your body is dealing with. Keep an eye on children and animals and cars in the heat. Take the physical threat seriously because it is a physical threat. And then, after this week, stay with the bigger picture too. Because the red warning's going to expire, the heat wave will break, the news will move on, and the underlying conditions that made this week possible will still be there, still accelerating, still moving the distribution curve further in the same direction. The numbers don't stop when the forecast does. Something is wrong with the sky and it's not going back. Stay informed, stay aware. The future of our summers depends on it. The arrow is pointing somewhere specific, and the speed at which it's travelling has been increasing. That's what the last 11 years of consecutive heat records mean. That's what trebled frequencies of extreme heat days since the 1960s mean. That's what a 20-fold increase in the probability of 40-degree days in Britain means. So yes, stay cool this week, drink water. Check on people who live alone. Don't underestimate what your body is dealing with. Keep an eye on children and animals in cars, in the heat. Take the physical threat seriously because it is a physical threat. And then, after this week, stay with the bigger picture too. Because the red warning's going to expire, the heat wave will break, the news will move on, and the underlying conditions that made this week possible will still be there, still accelerating, still moving the distribution curve further in the same direction. The numbers don't stop when the forecast does. Cognitive function drops. And for people who are already carrying health conditions, the deficit accumulates faster than the body can resolve it. The UK is not a dry heat country. This is a crucial point that often gets lost when people compare UK temperatures to those in southern Europe or parts of Asia. You can feel it in the way the heat seems to press against you rather than surround you. It doesn't lift, it sits. What also doesn't lift is the infrastructure pressure. Because here's the other dimension of a UK heatwave that distinguishes it from countries where this kind of heat is routine. The UK was not built for this. Railway tracks in Britain are designed for temperate operating temperatures.